So, we're going to go over these questions, and like I said before, some of them, we have talked about in class, some of them we have not. I did want to mention one thing before, we start. It's absolutely totally unrelated to this test, and that is today, I put on Edline a letter that I wrote about our trip that we are planning to Italy over the summer. And so I know Mr. Whelan had discussed that with some of you last year. We tried to have a meeting regarding that last year as well. We went to Italy in 2007, Mr. Feltman had, and for no basic, I don't want to say no basic good reason. There are a lot of educational reasons, none of which had anything to do with advanced placement in the United States history or economics. But Mr. Whelan and I now are trying to arrange a trip back to Italy. And it's an educational trip. It's an educational trip that starts in Venice and goes south through Tuscany through Florence and eventually into Rome. It doesn't necessarily have to do with advanced placement history or economics, but it is an educational trip. It's through the ACIS. And there are details about that on Edline. And I have literature regarding that if you're interested. But if you are, eventually by October, early October, you're going to have to put a deposit down.
Mr. Bankert, please call 5741, Mr. Bankert.
So I have some literature and other things. If you are interested in any level on that, it is July 11th through the 19th. So it's one of those 7-day trips. Yes.
How much is it going to cost?
It's like $3,500, for the whole deal. It's expensive. Traveling to Europe is expensive. So it's something you can think about, and I'll have other literature and things up, and you can think about it. But now we want to get back into this stuff. Now, when you get this test that you are going to take on Friday, the questions are going to come in the order that they come in the book. That means that they are not going to be organized in the manner that we presented them in some ways, largely dealing with the establishment of the colonies. So basically what we did in class is we said, all right, we have this notion of history and what historians do and primary sources and the Declaration of Independence. And then with the Declaration of Independence we said, well, how did we get here? How did we get to where these people decided that they wanted to break away and start their own country? Well, we said we had to start that with settlement. That's where the questions for the test will start, with settlement. And if they start with settlement, then they're going to start with Jamestown, right? They're going to start with Jamestown. And there'll be a few questions about, the prelude to that. And, so Jamestown is 1607, right? Jamestown is established as the first permanent British colony in North America. It's established in 1607. But the question that we posed when we established Jamestown is, why did it take so long for Britain to get into the colonization game? If you were thinking back, and we gave a number of reasons, but can anyone just quickly say one? Why did it take so long for Britain to get into the colonization game? Spain had a vast empire, and now, Josh, Britain is getting into it. Why?
Now?
Yes. Pardon? Well, they want to profit, but why didn't they want to profit earlier? Pardon? Yes, we talked about that internal conflict. We also talked about, the internal strife religiously, the Reformation, which we'll come back to in a second. But the other thing that we discussed as well is we talked about the dominance of Spain. What's sort of the event that marked sort of the descent of Spain and the ascent, Joe, of Britain?
Spanish Armada.
Yes, the defeat of the Spanish Armada. Not that dates are entirely important, but sometimes when it is history when things occurred. That was in 1588. So it sets the stage for colonization. And remember, it's not until Elizabeth I dies and James I takes over that a joint stock company is chartered to colonize British North America. Oh, incidentally, when we say a joint stock company, and the Virginia Company that established the Jamestown settlement was in fact a joint stock company. What do we mean by that, dear Boland? Well, you're saying that people owned what, Boland? A company, and what makes this company joint stock? Yes?
Because people put their money together to make money, to make a profit.
Yes. What makes it a joint stock company is that people pooled their money together. Investors pooled their money together to conduct a business activity in order to make a profit. Now, the business activity of the Virginia company was colonizing, was it not? How did they expect to profit from their colony in Jamestown? Who grunted? Oh, was that you? Go ahead, my friend.
Say gold.
Yes, and we talked about gold, we talked about finding a passage to the Northwest Orient, and eventually, what did we say was the means by which they did eventually sort of establish themselves. It wasn't by finding gold or the Northwest Passage, but eventually they were able to do what, dear Jowsey? A cash crop. They looked for a cash crop to grow. Tobacco was eventually the cash crop that was established in Jamestown. But not for some period of time. At first, things went very poorly in Jamestown. What do you think accounts for the fact that the Jamestown colony was almost wiped out because of starvation? Go ahead, Taylor.
They weren't really looking to settle it.
Nicely put. They were not really looking to establish a permanent settlement as much as they were looking to profit. And that was reflected in the actions that they took when they first got there. When they first got there, they didn't take actions that would be consistent with establishing a settlement. They didn't provide for themselves. Some people didn't want to work. The result was kind of negative: starvation, problems, fighting, feuding. What eventually seemed to be the thing that got them through? We identified this when we talked about it. Does anyone recall? What gets them through? Go ahead, Davina.
Is it like the help of the Indians?
Well, the help of the Native Americans is really kind of crucial to their success. But remember, we argued it was the forceful leadership of Captain John Smith that was argued to have gotten them through the first initial phase of starvation. And it is Captain John Smith that is going to try to arrange amicable relations with the Native Americans and force, the people that were there to work to establish some sort of permanent settlement. We talked about Smith and we talked about Pocahontas and the Native Americans there and their relations, and there'll be questions on the test about that, certainly about that. We did say that Pocahontas does not marry John Smith, but she marries John Rolfe, who has another kind of, besides the husband of Pocahontas, we said that Rolfe has another very, very important role that he plays. Go ahead.
He gets the first strain of mountain up tobacco.
Right, it is Rolfe that experiments with various types of strains of tobacco and finds one that will grow profitably in Virginia, and this becomes really what defines the colony. That people go there to cultivate tobacco, and tobacco becomes the major cash crop in Virginia and in Jamestown. Now, not only is tobacco the major cash crop in Virginia and Jamestown, it is also the major cash crop in Maryland. And here is where we diverge if you are looking at your notes. When we talked about this in class, we went from Jamestown up to Plymouth. Right? In your book, if you read your book, which I'm sure you have multiple times, you noted that they talked all about the southern colonies at one time. So now they then go to Maryland, and they talk about the foundation of Maryland. And what is the most distinctive thing that we said about the foundation of Maryland? Maybe two things. Yes, one.
It was Catholic?
Yes. That there was an element in the foundation of Maryland that involved Catholicism. Remember, Lord Calvert and his son Lord Baltimore were British Catholics, a persecuted minority, but favorites of the king. And so the king grants them a proprietary grant of land. Now, when we say a proprietary grant of land, what do we mean by that, dear Hill?